Thank you for joining us on This Week in Turkey. I am Murat Türsan. Tonight, I'm joined by Medyascope's very own Doğu Eroğlu, who broke a bombshell story about mass government surveillance that makes the NSA spying scandal look like child's play. Stay tuned for that. The Middle East is more tense than ever, with Turkey negotiating for a new military offensive into Syria, and a vacation spot in Iraq is bombed, officials blaming Turkey. In other news, Doğu will also break down the rise of fundamentalist Islamist sects in Turkey. And after that, we will have a little bit of good news as the government wipes out interest payments for student loans under pressure from the opposition. Our main story tonight, Turkey's Information and Communication Technology Authority, known as BTK, is in the middle of perhaps the largest mass surveillance scandal to date. According to a 15-page document obtained by Medyascope, things like your web traffic, texts, calls, location data, your ID, addresses, purchases, and really anything that you do on the internet is fed into BTK on the hour, every hour. The government knows what websites you visit, who you talk to, what you buy, where you are, every hour of every day. This, of course, is all done without parliamentary authority. Doğu will break the story down for us in just a little bit, but let's go to the video first.
Website traffic, texts, calls, and location data. Turkey's Information Technologies and Communication Authority, or BTK, potentially has the private data of 89 million people in Turkey. According to documents obtained by Medyascope, internet service providers are feeding internet traffic of all users to BTK every hour of every day. According to the documents, the data is not anonymized. BTK receives every data packet with the user's identity. BTK monitors all traffic, websites visited, usernames, national ID number, gender, nationality, address, phone number, and even location, old phone numbers, and old addresses. Experts say that even private calls and messages through apps like WhatsApp, Telegram, or Signal can be monitored. The story first broke when CHP's Istanbul MP Onursal Arıgüzel posted on Twitter on June 8th. Many of you remember the mass surveillance scandal former NSA employee Edward Snowden made public in 2013. BTK has been carrying out something similar for a while. The president of BTK requested the log records and published subscribe patterns from 313 internet service providers through a confidential letter. This letter sent to companies is not published on the official website of BTK. They want to hide their blatant law-breaking from the public eye. To date, BTK has not disputed Arıgüzel's claim. The letter in question, dated December 15, 2020, penned by BTK's VP Fethi Azıklı, states, "Our institution is tasked with detecting, monitoring, evaluating, and recording data for legal purposes in a timely and non-disruptive manner. There is a need to obtain more detailed information regarding the activities taking place on the internet within the scope of forensic and preventative purposes." It is estimated that the document labeled confidential and titled ISP traffic log pattern was sent to hundreds of service providers. Service providers who spoke with Medyascope on the condition of anonymity claim that the user traffic data flow from companies to BTK started as of 2021.
And folks, joining me right now, Medyascope's very own, the man who broke the story, Doğu Eroğlu. Doğu, thank you for joining me.
Hello.
Now, Doğu, let's talk a little bit about what BTK actually is, because I think it's important that we establish what the BTK actually does. And it's not necessarily a surveillance or an intelligence agency.
No, it's not.
All right.
No, it's not. BTK is like, well, it's a major regulatory body, but it has very similar components with those those regulatory bodies that have been established in Northern Europe or the United States. All those major countries had those publicly owned telecommunications countries around 1980s, 1990s, because of the requirements of that public service. The telecommunications requires a huge infrastructure installment, it was very costly for private firms to enter into that particular sector. But after 1980s, 1990s, that seemed to start to change rapidly, as in most of the countries, there appeared regulatory bodies who started to foresee the private companies, because they wanted private companies to be able to compete with formerly publicly owned companies. In Turkey, it just happened the same. After the privatization of the Turkish Telecom, BTK was formed, and the BTK's main main function was overseeing the public sector, so that the formerly owned Turkish Telecom, who was still the largest company in the sector, in the
it was
market.
A state agency.
It wasn't overrunning the smaller competing companies. So that was one thing, and they were overseeing the quality of the public or private service that was given to the customers, which was telephone services, internet services later. But this was the sole reason that it was founded. In Turkish case, BTK is kind of different than the others in Europe or in the US, because every journalist know the name of TIB. Mm-hmm. TIB was a communications body of a government body again, but TIB's main focus was wiretappings. Mm-hmm. So that was formed under BTK in 2000s again. But only after the attempted coup in 2016, TIB was deemed to be very dangerous by the government, so that they closed down TIB and gave the TIB's former jurisdiction to BTK. Then BTK became this hybrid body that has the regulatory power over the market, and also obtained monitoring authority over the phone conversations, over the internet. And then we were discussing this huge monitoring activity for at least for a decade. Mm-hmm. But there was no hard evidence showing that that was being done by BTK. But now we see that since December 2020, BTK is receiving every data that we are spending on the internet, every signal we are sending through instant messaging apps, mobile banking apps, browsers, our home internet connections, whatever connections we are doing, and etc. Every bit of piece of data that's being transacted through our devices are being sent to BTK almost instantaneously. In an hourly cases, they put our dossiers, all the information, all the traffic information, so that this whole big data file can show a lot of private information. Mm-hmm. In some cases, even we're not fully aware of.
See, what you said back there, that we were suspecting this going mm-hmm. back a decade, that is my greatest concern, because I fear that this story is not going to get picked up because people were already suspecting it. And I don't think we can overemphasize the gravity of the scandal. But let's go into it first. Now, let's talk about the documents you have uncovered. Mm-hmm. Now, can you tell us a little bit about what they entail?
The specific documents we uncovered says that they show that the BTK governing body, the president, mm-hmm. the presidency of BTK, wrote to all ISPs, the internet service providers of the company, that they want specific information regarding every user's traffic to be sent to BTK every hour. Every hour, my private information, which I thought it was remaining private, yeah. and anonymized. That is another aspect of this issue, because most of the internet users think that their data was being stored in somewhere already. They know it because they use Google, they use Facebook. Most of them are free devices, free tools, so we don't pay for them. In return, we're giving them data about ourselves so that those companies are...
they can sell stuff to us.
Yeah, exactly. Those companies are making deals with marketing companies, and we as customers are being handed out the most relevant ads.
Yeah.
That is one thing. But in this case, in this ad data relationship, our data is anonymized. Me, I'm not important as a person. I'm a stereotype in the eye of the marketing companies. But in this case of BTK, all my data are being recorded and kept under my name. So BTK knows exactly where I was an hour ago or a year ago.
What you bought online, what websites you went to?
That depends. Most of the internet sites has now HTTPS protocol. So they have a protocol for secure HTTP connection. So that, for example, if you're making a purchase over Amazon.com, they know that you have visited Amazon.com, but they don't really see which particular URLs you've been visiting on Amazon. So
I gotta say, thank God.
But it doesn't really matter because if you gather private information of one person in a quite long time, that really gives out what sort of a person you are. Like what sort of news websites you're visiting, what sort of mobile banking you are using, where you have been in the past year. Well, if this information gathers up, it really gives out a lot of information, like your political allegiances, your sexual orientation, your partner even, which you don't disclose to the government unless you marry him or her or they. So all those private personal information could be derived out of the personal data that has been kept by BTK. We don't know how do they keep it. We don't know how long they were going to keep it. And we also don't know if third-party companies have any access to those data or not. Because, obtaining data is quite hard. Obtaining data in a similar fashion by like 400 or so ISPs is really hard, so that the BTK gave out technical details to the ISPs. But once you gather the data, it's really easy to see who is who and who is communicating with who. So as far as we know, BTK doesn't really see what you've been writing to your pals on WhatsApp or in Signal or in Telegram, but they can track down who you are in communication with.
I see. And it is important to mention, you did mention this data is not at all anonymized, so the government can actually determine your bank usage, your political leaning, sexual orientation, anything of that nature. And which brings me to my last question. How can this data be used?
Well, that's a really good question, and I'm not fully capable of answering it right now. But we have some scenarios, of course. The first and the foremost is a mass profiling. Well, by just one click, the users of those data can specifically find out that who has been visiting Medyascope.tv. Like, this is one information. But if you put on enough queries on this database, you can see who among Istanbul citizens are visiting Medyascope, who among Kadıköy citizens visiting Medyascope, and who are they? Where are they living? What are their incomes? Are they married? what sort of places they go out to have some fun on Friday nights, because all those data are available to them. So, in fact, the options are limitless. We can talk about political manipulation, of course. It's rather hard to implement this data to a scheme that might remind us the Cambridge Analytica scandal, because in Cambridge Analytica scandal, there was a delivery tool, which was Facebook. They received enough information of, if I'm not mistaken, about 87 million US citizens, so that they showed each of those citizens relevant news stories so that they might influence their voting choice. But it was happening on Facebook. So that was the delivery tool. We don't really know how this data collected by BTK could be used as a political manipulation technique. We don't know it yet, but some experts suggest me, this information might contain very private, very sensitive information, so that this information could be used as a tool to blackmail some people who are very influential over a lot of citizens, so that they can change the voting behavior through that. There's definitely enough information in this database to be used as a blackmailing tool.
My God. Final question really quick. Can I get around this by using a VPN? That is also a very good question, very accurate. So there are some ways to escape from this monitoring. VPN is one of them. I use it myself, and I kind of try to monitor my own data. So when you use VPN, the data is just get scrambled. The signals become unreadable, so that they see the guys at BTK just see a traffic of gibberish. Oh, good.
But there is some glitches of using VPN, because once you're out there, once you're using your mobile connection, well, what do you do with your mobile phone? Like, what sort of apps do you use?
I mean, I usually just take the subway, so I load money onto my subway card.
That's one thing. I use Uber, for example, but Uber needs my location information.
Sure.
Once you're under a VPN connection, the location information doesn't really go through Uber's system, so that I can't really call a cab.
Right.
Or I can't take out a Martı to ride to the next subway station. In case of mobile banking apps, for example, VPN connections cause some troubles as well. If you try to connect your banking app through a VPN, they might not really recognize you. They might think that someone's trying to hack you.
Right.
So that in some cases, in some apps, definitely using a VPN really messes things up. So some apps really don't really like you to use VPN. And VPN means slower traffic, so that you might really find it dreadful to use VPN all the time. Like if you're trying to use Netflix, it won't really do good for you. Hours of streaming video. Well, VPN really don't agree with that.
Yeah, on a lighter note, Netflix has gotten wise to the VPN game anyway. But in effect, if you're using any type of location data, VPNs will not work. But in any other case, it would be prudent practice, folks at home, to use VPN. Doğu, thanks so much. Please stick around. And folks, hang tight, because we'll be talking about another big story with Doğu in just a little bit, so stay tuned for that. But in other news, the Middle East is heating up again. President Erdogan was in Iran this week, where he met with President Ibrahim Raisi and President Putin as a follow-up to the Syrian peace process. Just a little background. The Turkish parliament recently authorized yet another Turkish military operation into Syria, where Turkey aims to create a buffer zone in north of Syria and push YPG forces southward. Of course, the other two big players, Russia and Iran, aren't exactly thrilled about the idea, as they are Syria's strategic partners. And it looks like Erdogan is coming home without that green light for his military operation that he was vying for. That's not all, however. A suspected artillery strike hit a vacation spot in northern Iraq just yesterday, killing and injuring dozens. And the Iraqi government is putting the blame squarely on Turkey's head. Here's that story.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين.
President Erdogan, Iranian head of state Ibrahim Raisi, and Russian President Vladimir Putin met in Tehran Wednesday for the Syrian peace process. Erdogan stated that PKK and PYD are a common concern for all countries, saying, "We are determined to root out these sources of evil that threaten our national security out of Syria." The top item on the agenda was expected to be Turkey's potential incursion into Syria, a follow-up to Turkey's cross-border military operation in 2019 against YPG, a majority Kurdish battalion in the Syrian Democratic Forces, which Turkey considers to be a terrorist organization. President Erdogan had previously announced that Turkey would carry out a military operation in northern Syria to clear Tel Rifat and Manjib from YPG to create a safe zone. However, Russia and Iran have been unreceptive to Turkey's potential operation. Meanwhile, a humanitarian disaster took place in Iraq yesterday, and Iraqi officials are placing blame squarely on Turkey. 9 people were killed and 23 injured when explosions took place at a holiday spot in Zaho in northern Iraq. Iraqi officials are calling it an artillery strike. Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Qasimi held Turkey responsible for the attack. Qasimi also stated that Iraq reserves its right to retaliate and will take any precaution to protect its citizens. Turkey's ambassador to Iraq was summoned to the foreign ministry, and Iraq demanded an official apology from Ankara. Mobs gathered in front of the Turkish embassy in Iraq after the fact, protesters chanting and burning the Turkish flag. Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu swiftly denied responsibility for the attack on state broadcaster TRT. The whole world knows that Turkey has never carried out an attack against civilians. According to the information we received from the Turkish armed forces, there were no strikes conducted on civilians. We have also communicated that we can cooperate with the Iraqi authorities to investigate this treacherous attack that we believe was carried out by terrorist organizations.
And in domestic news, Ahmet Mehmet Ünlü, otherwise known as Robed Ahmet Hoca, is making some startling accusations about the rise of an armed Islamic fundamentalist group in Turkey. However, Ahmet Hoca is an interesting figure himself. He has had many fascinating takes, such as people playing chess will be cursed and selling 130 lira sandals that will make people see the Prophet Muhammad in their dreams, and many, many other compelling takes. Now, Ünlü has been making headlines in Turkey for some time now, but more so recently, particularly against the government. He has been ruffling the feathers of the Religious Affairs Directorate, the government institutions that strictly regulates Islam in Turkey. Now, last week, Ünlü accused the government of spreading Wahhabism in mosques, an extremist fundamentalist sect of Islam. This week, he is saying that there are armed Salafist groups in Turkey ready to spark an armed revolution. Salafism, of course, is associated with the likes of Al-Qaeda. Doğu will break it all down for us in just a little bit. But let's see what the Imam is preaching first.
Ahmet Mahmut Ünlü, a famous Islamic preacher in Turkey known as Ahmet Hoca, made startling accusations in an interview on Haberturk. Ünlü was recently in the headlines for criticizing the government's Directorate of Religious Affairs for allowing a Wahhabist Sikh to preach in a mosque in Turkey. This time, Ünlü took aim at Salafists, a fundamentalist sect in Islam, stating that they were preparing for a civil war. These people have started a war wherever they went. Currently, 3.6% of Turks are Salafists, and it's on the rise. It has destroyed many families, causing divorces, and husbands and wives calling each other infidels. These groups are being funded by Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. They are saying you have to kill infidels. When foreign powers see that the movement is gaining steam, they will act. They have places where they hide weapons. They are not keeping them in places that they know will be raided. It's known when and to whom these weapons were given to. Right now, radical Salafist groups in Turkey are extremely dangerous. Shortly thereafter, the Directorate of Religious Affairs released a response to UNLU's claim of Wahhabists and Salafist sects spreading across mosques in Turkey. The Directorate denied all allegations, saying, "The recent allegations in the media accusing our Directorate of serving the spread of Salafist and Wahhabist ideology in our country do not reflect the truth and are extremely disturbing and saddening." The Directorate of Religious Affairs is an institution with clear principles and a well-known stance, which has adopted the true understanding of religion along the lines of the Quran and the Sunnah. The Directorate carries out religious teachings and guidance without compromising these principles.
And we're going back to Doğu for him to break it down. Doğu is actually quite knowledgeable about the subject. You actually, as a matter of fact, wrote a book about this, the ISIS networks, right?
Right.
All right. So, Doğu, Ahmet Hoca has made some concerning allegations, to say the least, and we really wouldn't be doing our jobs if we did not take his word for it. So now he's alleging that 3.6% of Turks are actually Salafists, which would make about 3.2 million people, if my math is correct. Now, yeah, he says that they're trying to start a civil war, but can you expand on this? Now, what is he alleging exactly, and how credible are these allegations?
Well, it's the second time that he raised concerns about the growing Salafi threat in Turkey. But I think the numbers he mentioned, I would say it's kind of an overshoot. Like it is very reasonable that the Salafist view kind of gained momentum after the success of the Islamic State. But it was limited to that time, that particular time, and I would say 2014 to 2017, perhaps. That was the peak time of Salafist ideas. Outreach has grown exponentially in Turkey as well. And we have seen a major outflux of people to Syria. And I can say that like around 8 to 10,000 of men went to Syria to fight, either under the banner of HTS or in Islamic State, but no more than that. So after the initial air bombardments has started, I've seen a major returnee activity to Turkey. Like most of the Turkish citizens who left their homes to join Islamic State or the Al-Qaeda affiliates in Syria have returned to Turkey after 2015. Only the higher ranking officers of Islamic State remained there. And in recent years, we still see that they are trying to find a way back to Turkey. So it's not a very popular ideology or a practice to join Islamic State. We should differentiate different parts of the Salafi tradition when we talk about the Cübbeli Ahmet Hoca's warnings. Well, a huge part of the Salafi tradition, I'd say 90%, don't really believe in taking arms as the right thing, as a political tool. Only a minor part of this Salafist tradition sees fighting, actual combat, is a political tool, is a reliable political tool, so that we should really don't extend our concern to all the Salafists. And while saying that the Salafis the number of Salafis might have grown larger than 3 million, I would say only a small portion of the Salafis, if it's true, could be taking up arms when the conditions are right. And I see most of the Salafis don't really see Turkey as an hostile country still, even though Turkey started to fight with Islamic State after 2016, they still see Turkey hosting a majority of a Muslim population. So Turkey is still not hostile grounds for most of the Salafis, and I don't really see any point those Salafis start to target Turkish targets on Turkish soil still. But I'm suspecting after the Islamic State started to popularize the Salafist ideas, now Salafism has a larger base in Turkey, and Turkey might be home to wannabe jihadists in the future, so that a lot more people could travel wherever the next jihad is materialized in the future. But unless this happens, I don't really see a huge threat coming from those populations, those communities. Those communities, in fact, are really conservative, and by conservative I mean they want to be left alone in most cases. And unless the Turkish security apparatus focuses their interest on those local communities, I underline it, local meaning communities of Turkish origin, unless they are being harassed, I don't see any chance that they take up arms against Turkey. But I think the Turkish security apparatus find out that the most viable threat option might be the Iraqi community, and they started to monitor the Iraqi community more closely after 2018. And I think they have a point. Most of the Islamic State networks that remain functional in Turkey are focused rather saving up the prisoners from camps in Iraq and Syria, and by doing it, they need financial sources, so that most of the Iraqis who still have connections with the Islamic State networks are trying to figure out ways to smuggle their friends or relatives from there. So they're focusing, the security apparatus is looking after that. There has very limited cases regarding arms and ammunitions or increasing armaments. We have seen very small evidence for any Salafi-related groups increasing their arsenal since 2016. So, well, seeing everything, I would say Cübbeli Ahmet Hoca has some point. The Salafi ideology is gaining ground in Turkey since the beginning of the Islamic State, but I don't see any groups increasing their preparations to show hostility towards Turkey.
I see. So maybe potentially blowing it a little bit out of proportion, and we should take it with a grain of salt until second notice. Right.
We should see more concrete evidence before making any other conclusions.
I see. Fair enough. So far it's all speculative. Well, Doğu, I'm going to ask you to come into the studio a lot more from now on. But thank you so much. And main opposition party CHP's chair, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, scores a political victory this week, despite not even being in parliament. This week has been an absolute case study as to how to use a bully pulpit. Kılıçdaroğlu, from the comfort of his home, has gotten the government to forgive interest rate payments on all student loans in Turkey just by tweeting about it. Student loans in Turkey have been absolutely crushing graduates in recent years. An average borrower in Turkey graduates with about 30,000 liras in debt. But recently, with sky-high inflation, borrowers have been seeing their debt double, triple, if not quadruple. One Twitter user posted that she graduated owing 41,000 liras and now is looking at 150,000. So her debt has more than tripled since she's graduated. And coupled with unemployment, inflation, low wages, and every single terrible economic indicator imaginable, how could anyone be expected to get up under this crushing debt? Well, Kılıçdaroğlu clearly agrees and got the government to take action. Thanks to Kılıçdaroğlu's calls to stop paying the loans, the government has wiped out the insane interest rates on all of them. Let's go to that story.
The opposition in Turkey took home a victory this week as pressure from CHP chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu pushed the government to forgive interest payments on student loans. Student loans in Turkey averaged 30,000 liras per student, and inflation and interest rates left many destitute, amounting to astronomical amounts. Kılıçdaroğlu had posted on Twitter earlier this year, "In a year, we will become the ruling party and cancel all interest on student loans. Don't pay your loans back." After Kılıçdaroğlu's announcement, Minister of Youth and Sports Mehmet announced that the student loans were being reworked. President Erdogan had also announced, "We won't sacrifice our youth to interest rates and inflation." After his cabinet meeting on Tuesday, President Erdogan fired back at Kılıçdaroğlu, saying, "The annual recalculation of student loans were never made according to a set interest rate. It was being done according to the Domestic Producer Price Index. We have never charged interest rates on student loans. But lies are plentiful when Mr. Kemal, shamelessly, unabashedly, keeps talking about interest rates." After the cabinet meeting, Erdogan announced new regulations on student loans, and interest rates on loans have been effectively wiped out. After the announcement of interest rates on student loans being cancelled, the hashtag #ThanksKılıçdaroğlu started trending on Turkish Twitter. Following the monumental decision, Kılıçdaroğlu made another post with a loading logo captioned EYT, a common abbreviation for millions of working older adults unable to retire due to controversial age requirements set by previous governments.
And with that, that's it for us in This Week in Turkey. I have been Murat, Türsan. A special thanks to Doğu Eroğlu for joining us in the studio. A special thanks to Mehmet Tanverdi for news text and Kathleen Phelps for voiceovers. And if you haven't done so, folks, please consider subscribing and support the channel on Patreon if you can. And thank you for joining us.
Türkiye'nin sivil, bağımsız, özgür ve çoğulcu bir medya ortamına ihtiyacı var. Medyascope, 20 Ağustos 2015'te bu ihtiyacı karşılamak üzere yola çıktı. Ama yolumuz uzun. Bu yolculukta bize Patreon veya YouTube'un katıl butonu üzerinden katkıda bulunabilirsiniz. Destek verin, sizinle güçlenelim.